I'm Dave Champion, your guide to success in all your keto goals, and welcome back to the Busy Keto Life channel. I speak often about the keto ratio of 80% fat, 15% protein, and 5% or less carbs. Some of you may wonder why it's 80-15-5. Was 80-15-5 just pulled out of a hat? No, quite the opposite, as a matter of fact. There are nutritional, physiological, and practical reasons to use the 80-15-5 ratio. But as always, your Busy Keto Life, the number one reason is it assures your success at keto. Ready to find out why it works? Let's do it. I preach the 80-15-5 ratio for keto, yet you may have heard others offer different percentages. Are they wrong? Some are, some aren't, depending on what they're saying. Today, I don't want to get into the loony numbers I've heard from some that will guarantee you fail at keto. That's for another video. Instead, let me say that when keto expositors offer other percentages that are in the ballpark, they're not necessarily wrong. To me, wrong implies you won't have the keto experience, you won't get into ketosis, and you won't drop the weight. So, if these other expositors aren't wrong, why do I advise using the 80-15-5 ratio? Simple. Because your success is guaranteed at 80-15-5. When you start getting into some of those other numbers, you begin reducing your odds of being successful. Going from the standard American diet to keto is a pretty big shift for most people. It can be daunting or even stressful. I believe the biggest reason people feel stressed when they consider going keto is they don't have the practical how-to of doing it right, which is exactly what Busy Keto Life is here to provide. Because giving people the tools to succeed is what Busy Keto Life is all about, please take a moment right now to hit the subscribe button so you continue getting all the great info you need to succeed at keto. Then you can share the information with others. You can help them get healthy too. Let's take a quick look at each of the 80-15-5 macros. Let's start with fat. When in ketosis, your body is no longer using carbs as its energy source. It's using exclusively fat. Considering that fat is, when in ketosis, the sole energy source, we want to give the body all it can use, and that's actually quite a bit. The other cool thing about high fat consumption when in ketosis is it triggers a physiological response in the body to start utilizing your stored fat for energy, which is why we get results like this in just months. 80% fat intake gives you all the dietary fat you need and signals the body to use that stored fat for energy. And as you just saw, 80% fat intake does not make you fat. It does just the opposite. What about 15% protein? Keto is, for good reason, a moderate protein program. Americans have been seriously misled about how much protein the body needs. One of the most common falsehoods is that we should be consuming 1 gram of protein for each pound of body weight. That lie was primarily promoted by the supplement companies for the obvious reason and parroted in gyms across the country by people who believed the paid content they were reading in bodybuilding magazines and in product ads. Of course, research tells us the body doesn't need anywhere near that amount of protein. So what is the correct amount of protein consumption each day? Oh, wouldn't that be easy? But there is no such fixed number. While this video isn't intended to be a complete presentation on protein, I will throw out some facts, and I do a complete in-depth discussion of protein in another video. Unlike carbs and fat, the body has no way to store excess protein you eat, so eating too much is counterproductive to our goals. I get into why that is in the All About Protein video. Generally speaking, an 18-year-old's body can utilize more protein than, say, a 50-year-old. Proper protein consumption is absolutely essential for your overall health on quite a number of levels, not merely building or maintaining muscle. Consuming more protein than your body can utilize is hard on your kidneys. And lastly, this is Thomas DeLauer, a keto practitioner and one of the most in-demand male fitness models in America. He states that he consumes 90 to 100 grams of protein per day. At his weight, that averages 0.53 grams of protein per pound of body weight. Can you think of any reason you need more? Now we come to 5% carbs. This is a simple one. The defining characteristic of the keto lifestyle is being in ketosis. Getting into ketosis requires a deprivation of carbs. Eating a low-carb diet in no way means one is in ketosis. Hell, there isn't even a definition of what is low carb. In one study I read, the researchers characterized the carbohydrates portion of their study as low carb at 34% carbs. Keto isn't difficult, but it is a bit more nuanced than people typically understand. One example of that is that 80-15-5 does not exist alone. It doesn't operate in a vacuum. There are other elements that work in conjunction with that ratio, the most important of those being what I refer to as hard ceilings. To assure your success at keto, you should establish a hard ceiling for carbs and protein. These hard ceilings work in combination with the 80-15-5 ratio to create a system that prevents excesses and the problems that come from those errors. What is a hard ceiling? A hard ceiling is a decision you make as to what the maximum number of grams will be for carbs and protein each day. As an example, I've set my personal protein ceiling at 95 grams a day. That's not a target, a goal, or an average. It's a ceiling, a cap. That is the amount I do not want to exceed. There is no need for me to even come close to that number. My carb ceiling is 20 grams a day. Again, that's not a target, a goal, or an average. It's a ceiling. I should mention that 20 grams a day is an aggressive number, and I'm not suggesting everyone adopt 20 grams. Most people should be fine with 30 grams a day as their ceiling. Let's look at some examples of how these ceilings interact with the 80-15-5 ratio. Each of the examples I'm about to share with you have the macro ratio at 80-15-5. Let's take a look at how calorie intake, the 80-15-5 ratio, and hard ceilings produce their own limiting factors that keep you where you need to be. In this first screenshot, we can see the person has consumed a bit less than 2,000 calories this day. We can see that protein is in the moderate range at 75 grams, and carbs are well within range of a person who has set 30 grams as his or her hard ceiling. In other words, everything looks good. In this next screenshot, things get more interesting. Here, the calorie intake jumped to 3,600 calories. Carbs have risen to the level, at 45 grams, where some people will not be able to stay in ketosis. Many will, but some won't. If our goal is to ensure success, we don't want to be in a range where our bodies may not be able to maintain ketosis. Imagine if the carb ratio was, as some people suggest, 10%, without the hard ceiling I advocate. At 3,600 calories, carbs would be 90 grams, which means 100% of those nearing or exceeding 3,000 calories in a day would not be in ketosis. Looking at the protein, unless you're 6'5" and 260 pounds, the protein is no longer in the moderate range. Again, not where we want to be. In example number 3, daily calorie intake has gone to just shy of 5,000. We can see carbs are now at 65, an amount at which almost no one can stay in ketosis. In other words, for probably more than 95% of the population, they would no longer be in ketosis. On the protein side, we see it's double what Thomas DeLauer or I would consume and well beyond what your body can utilize. In another video, I explained how the body converts protein it can't use and can't store into glucose, which produces higher blood sugar, which can throw some people out of ketosis and will definitely drive up insulin, something we don't want, especially for something as completely avoidable as going beyond moderate protein consumption. Having now seen these examples, we can see a couple of things. First, we can see why it's so important to track our macros every day. Second, we can see how, when we combine the 80-15-5 ratio with hard ceilings, we create a system that not only self-limits excess calorie intake, but also prevents us from getting too high on carbs and protein. Now let's take a look at some real-world screenshots. These are from my Simple Stupid Keto app at the end of a couple of different days. Here we see 80% fat, which is arguably the most critical element to maintain. It was a rather low-carb day, which is reflected in the rise of protein to 18% as a percentage, but note that the hard number for protein at 84 grams is well within the acceptable range. Here we again see 80% fat. Carbs are in the fairly usual range for me, and the hard number for protein is again well within range. Here we see it was a higher calorie day. Carbs were a tad over my hard ceiling of 20 grams a day, but considering 20 grams a day is an aggressive number to begin with, I'm not concerned about 22. As we look at the hard protein number of 111, we can see this is where the additional calories came from, and I'm over my hard ceiling of 95 grams. As an occasional occurrence, no big deal, but if it persists, I'd have to make an adjustment in what food items I'm selecting. Lastly, we have a day in which the ratio is the perfect 80-15-5, and we can see that all the hard numbers are where they need to be, which is how the system is designed to work. One thing that may have caught your attention is that for carbs and protein numbers to be where we really want them to be while maintaining 80-15-5, the calorie count hovers about 2,000. That may be of concern to those who have a fast metabolism. They may fear that 2,000 calories is not enough for them. No sweat. Here's the way we'll tackle that. First, Your body is functioning differently on keto than when you were on the standard American diet. So my first recommendation is to start at 2,000 calories a day and see how you feel before presuming it won't be enough when on keto. But what if, after eating 2,000 calories a day, you find it really isn't enough for you? You may have noticed there was no discussion about a hard ceiling for fat. Why is that? Because keto is all about the fat, and fat is the only macro that, if you go over ratio, won't have any negative effect on your keto success. It will simply add more calories. Further, there's a feedback cycle in the body in which the digestive tract signals the brain when it has had enough fat, and a chemical reaction in the brain stops your hunger and gives you a feeling of being completely satiated. That means it's virtually impossible to eat too much fat. Interestingly, there is no similar feedback mechanism when consuming protein or carbs, which is why it's much easier to overeat on the standard American diet. So, if you find 2,000 calories a day isn't getting it done for you, simply up your fat intake. And since fat has more than double the caloric density of either carbs or protein, it won't take much to give you the additional calories you want. You can get more fat by selecting more food items that have a greater percentage of fat. You can also use fat bombs, something I discussed in another video. Or you can make use of oils such as MCT or coconut. And despite what program doctors will tell you, saturated fat is incredibly healthy for you. So much so, in fact, that I make sure I consume at least 1.5 tablespoons of coconut oil every day. One thing I should mention is that if you boost your fat intake while maintaining your hard ceiling on carbs and protein, your percentages will shift. They'll start looking fat heavy, more than 80%. And by association, carbs and proteins will drop to less than how they would otherwise appear. That's just how percentages work, and that's no problem as long as what you're seeing in the hard numbers section has your carbs and protein where you want them to be. I hope I've explained in an easily understandable way why 80-15-5 is the best ratio to assure your success and how it works in conjunction with hard ceilings as a simple and cool built-in limiting factor working to your advantage. For those who've already been on keto, let me know in the comments, please, how you handle coordinating your macros. And I'd love to hear from beginners if this video was helpful in understanding how to more easily manage the process to create the success you're after. So please, let me know in the comments section. And as always, take a quick second to click on the subscribe button so you get notified every time a new video posts to help you achieve your keto success. It has been a pleasure. I'll speak with you again soon. Until then, keto on.